We're ready to jump right in. So, this week's topic is motivation and reinforcers. Um, and my name is Tiffany Cochran. I'm a board certified behavior analyst, director of autism advocacy and intervention. And we're joined by Sarah, who is a registered behavior technician who also works for autism advocacy and intervention. And we're able to bring you these trainings because we have a partnership with the Northeast Kingdom Head Starts. So thank you to them for making this possible. And the trainings will be posted on the Autism AI website. You can access them there, or you can access them through the Autism Advocacy and Intervention YouTube. And for anybody who is looking for last week's training, that one is actually not up yet. I will send an email out when that one is up on the YouTube. So this week, the kind of goals of this training are to identify different states of motivation for your children or the kids that you work with, and then how to identify quality reinforcers to use for those children. And then most importantly, identifying when reinforcers will have the greatest impact on behavioral outcomes. And when I'm talking about behavioral outcomes, I'm not just talking about, what you think of as good behavior or bad behavior. I'm talking about even something as simple as teaching a new skill, teaching a new learning target. Reinforcers can have a huge impact on learning if they're timed appropriately. And you can get some really great outcomes if you really think about reinforcers that are connected to the motivation of the child. So, for the sake of this training, we're going to use a pretty technical definition of reinforcers. Reinforcers are really stimuli. They're the items, the activities, the attention that have an effect of increasing the likelihood that a behavior will occur or increase the frequency of the behavior in the future. So when I'm talking about a reinforcer, I'm talking about the actual item. I'm not talking about the procedure of reinforcement. I'm talking about the items that you use that are delivered when you are reinforcing a child. Reinforcers are delivered immediately after a desired behavior occurs. So you want to keep any tangible reinforcers nearby if you're teaching a new skill or if you're having a child work for something. That delay in going to find the reinforcer, if it's in another room or having to wait to go get it from the store or whatever that might be, could decrease how effective that reinforcer is. And reinforcers are specific to each person. So some kids like watching TV, some like playing with their toys or playing outside. Some really like getting a lot of praise and attention from adults. Some kids don't. It's really specific to the child. And you can even think about that in yourself. Some of us might like at the end of the day having a glass of wine, where some of us at the end of the day might like watching TV or spending some time outside or going for a walk. It's really, reinforcers are very individual. So it's important to kind of take a step back and look at what is reinforcing to the child that you're trying to reinforce and really identify the things that are going to be most effective so that you're not kind of just throwing random stuff at them thinking like maybe this will work or maybe that will work. It's important to actually take a little bit of time to discover what actually will work for each kid. And keep in mind, preferences change over time. So a child who's really into Paw Patrol this week might be really into Bubble Guppies next week. So, getting a million little Paw Patrol stickers might be reinforcing for a short period of time, but if that child loses interest in those characters, those reinforcers are going to have less value. And then just a quick note, I know we've talked about this in previous weeks. Food reinforcement or food reinforcers can really be an unhealthy thing to present to your kids. I know that sometimes it's okay to say, hey, if you clean up the whole house with me, we can do a special treat. I think that's totally fine. But if you're consistently using food as a method of reinforcement, it can cause kids to create unhealthy relationships with certain types of food. It can make your child anxious about getting access to food. Um, and especially, you should never allow access to a scheduled meal to be used as a reinforcer. The child should get that meal no matter what, because that's part of their ongoing care, and they need that. So, really try to limit your use of food reinforcement whenever you can. Okay, so identifying reinforcers. This is probably the most important part of this training. As you guys all know, I really like making lists. So I do recommend making a short list of your child's most preferred toys, their most preferred activities. You can kind of do this over the course of, 20 minutes or an hour of them playing and see what they're really gravitating towards at that time. And when I say make a short list of the toys and activities, keep in mind that this is going to change over time because preferences do change over time. And then some kids don't really get that much out of getting access to toys or activities, or maybe they already have free access anyway. So if your child might benefit more from attention as a reinforcer, try to figure out what kind of attention they like. Do they like to be taken aside and quietly told, wow, you did a really good job on that? Or do they prefer if you make a huge deal about it and, basically throw a party every time they learn something new? Some kids only like just getting a little bit of eye contact or maybe a smile. Some really like it if you go and tell everybody in the world that you see about what they did. I think about, uh, some kids I've worked with in the past, when they're potty training, they want to run out and tell the whole world that they went to the bathroom on the potty. And some other kids are kind of just like a little more shy about it, and they're not as interested in everybody knowing about that. So it's important with attention to think about what kind of attention reinforcement is most effective for the child you're thinking about. And then you can ask the child if they're able to communicate at that level. You can ask them what they really like. You can ask their siblings what the child likes to play with and add those things to the list. Other caregivers, so the child might be really interested in playing with, dolls and stuffed toys when they're at grandma's house, but they might be more interested in playing with trucks and trains when they're at home. So there could be some reinforcers that are sort of unknown to you if you're not the caregiver throughout the entire day. And then offering choices is a good way to figure out what's more reinforcing. So once you have that list of the preferred toys, activities, types of attention, then you can start to offer choices to help motivate your child to participate in a new activity. And these can be visual choices or verbal, depending on the level that the child is at. Something to keep in mind, and I've said this already today, but something to keep in mind is things that are reinforcing at one point in the day might not be in reinforcing later on or even the next day. So if you kind of set out at the beginning of the day thinking, I'm going to give stickers all day long for doing a good job, and my child really likes stickers, so this is going to work. Yeah, they might really like stickers, but maybe after nap time, they're not as motivated to earn stickers because they already have a lot of stickers from you. So, you know, having having that list of reinforcers is important, but also knowing that you might need to swap it out, and the one that you're thinking might work right now may not be as effective as you think, so you might have to swap that reinforcer out for something else. And then we're going to talk about this a lot later. Understanding what's motivating your child will help you understand which reinforcer to offer. And motivation in children, when we're talking about reinforcement, is something I could talk about for probably 3 or 4 hours and not even cover the entire topic. So I've tried to boil it down for you in some of the later slides. So here's an example of a choice board that we use at the clinic. So This is actually just kind of a snapshot of it, but once you have that list of items that a child really enjoys, you could make visuals if that's something that your child really needs. And instead of having them work for a specific reinforcer, you would have them work for access to their choice board. So all of those activities would need to be able to be available to them. Anything that you present as a potential reinforcer, you have to be able to deliver pretty quickly. Um, and, some kids might only really need two choices and would benefit from only having two choices. And some kids could have, I have some kids that I've worked with who have whole flip books of different preferred activities that they can choose from. If you don't have clip art or board maker, you can take pictures of actual items in your home, or you can take out the preferred reinforcers and kind of leave them in a specific area. And that can be the toys that they only have access to when they've, earned all the stickers on their chart, or when they've earned all of their check marks for completing work from home. And this is definitely catered towards the Head Start aged group. You can also build choice boards, like instead of having Play Doh and reading books together in bubbles, it could be internet password and 30 minutes TV time and, playing basketball at the park or whatever. You can cater it to an older child as well. It's just I use these examples for the younger kids since it's a Head Start crowd we're kind of talking about. And then the activities are things that your child typically really seems to enjoy participating in. So if your child doesn't like coloring, that's not a reinforcing activity for them. But maybe sidewalk chalk is. So you really want to think about what the child's actually interested in and not just put like a list of items that they have. And then save or reserve the most highly preferred activities for them to have access to after the tasks that are most difficult for them. So, if your child really, really struggles to stay in their seat at dinner time, then you're going to save access to their number one favorite thing until after dinner time. They shouldn't have access to it at all throughout the day until that point, because that's the thing you're working on and that's going to make it the most effective. And when you're using reinforcement to target a specific thing, like sitting longer at the table, that reinforcement should be really, really salient. It has to be something that they're super interested in, because if they're not that interested in it, you're not going to see very big behavioral impacts. Here's an example of a token board that I use with a lot of kids. It's really simple. It could be a sticker chart too, but it's just a very quick sort of, you earn stars. When you get 10 stars, you can earn whatever you're working for. And I actually use from this slide, I use these same images to put right on the token board. That's one of the benefits of having a laminator. I know not everybody has access to that, so you can make variations of this, draw it out on a piece of note paper and just write what they're working for and do check marks. So it doesn't have to be something that you need to print out or need to go buy or anything like that. And token boards and sticker charts are really, really great reinforcement sources. You're able to kind of stretch out how often a child earns reinforcement by using a token board, because they have to earn those stars before they actually get access to the specific item or type of activity. It does take a little bit of time for kids to learn the concept. So if a child's never used a sticker chart or a token board before, it might take you a little bit of work to teach them how it works. So if your child doesn't really get this concept pretty quickly, I would start with just one or two of the spaces empty. So all they need to do is earn 2 stars or 2 checks, and then they earn the item that they're working for. The reason that you do this is you want them to earn it quickly so that they understand that the full board equals my favorite activity, or this preferred activity or choice time. And then you would slowly increase the requirements. So the next time that they're working for an activity, maybe they're sitting down doing some letter writing or something like that, you might have them earn 3 stars that time before they get their break in their preferred activity. You should always, when you're giving stickers or giving tokens, you should always pair it with verbal praise or another mildly preferred reinforcer. If kids like being rubbed on the back or high fives or something like that, you should always pair it with some sort of social praise. And the reason you do this is so that you don't have to use the token board forever. A token board is a really good way to stretch out the time between reinforcing activities, but it's also a good way to help kids learn the value of social reinforcement if they're not already reinforced by, being told that they're doing a good job or something like that. And then again, I'm going to kind of keep on coming back to this, but make sure the item that they're working for is immediately available. So if you have your child working on a really, really difficult task and they want, a new thing of Play-Doh to play with afterward, then make sure it's available. It shouldn't be something where you're like, okay, you earned it. I'll get it when I go to the store this weekend. If they have to wait that long to actually get access to the reinforcer, then it's not reinforcing. And actually that could be really detrimental if you're planning on using a token board or a sticker chart. If the item's not immediately available, it decreases the effectiveness of even using that procedure at all. So these are some examples I found on the internet. This was just from a quick Google search. And I do have a link to this reinforcement survey at the end of the slideshow. So for anybody who's interested in printing this out, I've used things like this in classrooms in the past. I've used them with kids for home services. And this is really more of, for older kids, you can have them fill it out themselves. For younger kids, this is actually a really good way for parents to make a list of most preferred activities without having to really consciously go and watch their kids play with each toy individually. So it's just a little checklist of different types of toys that they seem to prefer. And different types of tokens, different types of activities. They do have food on here. Again, I really recommend not using food reinforcement unless it's absolutely necessary. I would say only use it as a last resort if you're dealing with like a very crucial skill for them to learn. And then on the right-hand side, this is actually a sample of a kind of data sheet that I would use if I were officially doing a reinforcer assessment. So in applied behavior analysis, we actually conduct these types of assessments pretty regularly. And we do it in a really systematic way where you're presenting the top 4 identified reinforcers, you're presenting them next to each other to figure out which one is the most reinforcing. This is especially useful if you're working with kids who have limited verbal skills or with a child who tends to identify items that they don't want instead of items that they do. So some kids, you'll put 2 things in front of them, like a car and a train, and they might, if you ask them, which one do you like, and, hold it out in front of them, they might reach for the car or say car, but what they really want is that train. So what you're doing when you're systematically testing what types of reinforcement kids like is you're actually finding scientifically what is the most preferred reinforcer. This is something that's a little bit more intensive, so teachers don't typically have time to do this. Parents might not have time to do this, but it is a tool you could use if you find that you're having a really hard time finding ways to motivate and reinforce your child. Before I move on to motivation, does anybody have any questions about the reinforcer side that we've discussed so far? Okay.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I had to unmute myself. So this is Julia Tucker. Obviously, classroom setting, this wouldn't be a factor, but for home settings, money, what's the thoughts on that, since it's not really discussed anywhere here?
That's a really good question. I think that that is something that some parents definitely use. I think that it's important to teach children the value of money. I know some families, especially with older kids, will do an allowance or, certain amounts of money for certain chores. Um, I think that it is really just up to the family and what their preferences are. I know that in school settings, we wouldn't be able to reinforce with money.
Hmm.
So obviously, we wouldn't do that. But I guess my kind of caution with using money as a reinforcer is that, does your child understand the value of money, and do they understand that that money is then used to buy items? And if they do, then it could be a really good reinforcer for your child. But then when you kind of look at the other side of it, if there ever comes a point where you can't use money as a reinforcer, other reinforcers probably won't be as strong. So it's kind of a, you know, choose your battle, choose your ending kind of thing. If a child doesn't know the concept of money yet, I would say don't use that as a reinforcer unless it's like pennies, because those are almost like tokens. Um, if they just like seeing more pennies inside of their piggy bank, and they get a penny every time they clean their room or every time they, help their brother um, pick up toys or something like that, that's almost more like a token reinforcement system, because they're not actually using those pennies to go buy things. It's just the act of getting the penny that's exciting to them. But
Hmm.
if the child understands the concept of money, definitely think through, okay, is this something that I can maintain? Am I setting up a situation where they're going to expect to get money for everything? Um, Whenever you're introducing a reinforcement plan or reinforcers, you want to be able to fade it out eventually. So if you can't fade out giving them money, is it going to cause more issues down the road when you can't give it to them later? So
Gotcha.
I know you asked me a question and I just gave you a million questions back, but those are really
No,
the
that's
the
okay.
cautions I
I
would give
understand the
someone.
factors that you'd want to consider as a parent based on age and stage and everything else.
Exactly.
I do have one more question, but feel free to tell me if it's like kind of off track and should be at the end. But this was used as a money motivation through a recommendation of a counselor, but I was thinking about in a classroom setting, it could be something that was done, say, with Legos or something. But basically, they started out their day or their week or whatever their timeline is, um, where they have a jar with a certain number of quarters. They basically had $10 of quarters at the beginning of the week. This was the scenario because it was an adolescent. And instead of them feeling like they're having to like be bribed or earn, that $10 is already theirs. But for every time they spaced something, because this particular adolescent had attention difficulties and didn't complete a task or a chore or follow through with something they were supposed to, one of the quarters came out of the jar. And at the end of the week, whatever's left in the jar, whether it's none or, $7 worth, they got to keep. And so it was kind of a reverse thing where they're not having to like earn their way towards it, beg it that way. It's already theirs, but they're kind of going to be losing and watching it disappear on them um, with their lack of attention to the details they're supposed to be responsible for. So I was thinking like classroom setting, if it was something like, end of the day they have Lego time if they're into Legos, and you're removing Lego pieces to where they're dwindling down to they've only got a few pieces left by the end of the day and they can't build the big elaborate thing that they wanted or something. But just I didn't know if in a reverse way that you've ever seen that implemented in any ways.
Yeah, that is a behavioral strategy that's been pretty well studied. It's called response cost, and essentially you remove whatever the reinforcing item is. You remove some of it contingent on a specific behavior. Whenever you use cost is technically a punishment procedure. So you're trying to decrease the frequency of the off task behavior, increase the frequency of on task behavior.
Yeah.
So anytime you use a punishment procedure in behavior analysis, you also have to pair that with reinforcement. So the child should still have access to earning additional Legos for specific things, or earning a quarter back, or it should work in both directions.
Okay.
It doesn't always. I know that some people find that it's much more effective to start with the full amount of reinforcement available and then take time away. You get 30 minutes of iPad time after school, but you only get those 30 minutes if everything's complete. If you only have, 4 out of 5 items complete before then you have
20 instead of
five minutes taken
30.
off of that or something like that. That works really well for some kids and some families. Again, I would say make sure um, make sure anytime you're doing a response cost that there is some reinforcement paired with it, because it can really result in the kid becoming pretty frustrated and constantly feel like they're losing, or constantly feel anxious that they're going to lose things. So you really want to pair that with reinforcement at the same time.
Yeah,
Did
and
that
the
answer your
personality
question?
of the child. Yeah, and the
Okay.
personality of the child, because if you've got a child that you're that has easy meltdowns and things like that, and just really emotionally wouldn't be able to handle kind of watching something disappear that way, then
Right.
yeah.
So I
So
actually kind of think of, I don't know if any of you read these books, but I think of the reward system they have in the Harry Potter books where, the
5 points from Gryffindor, but
exactly,
then
like
10
you can have
points to
points taken
Gryffindor.
away, but then for doing great things they can have points added too. So you always want to have that balance of being able to add things. That's why, when parents ground their kids, you're grounded. You don't get to have your, you know, Xbox anymore. I don't even know what systems are out there. Grounding doesn't really work that well, because unless they have a route to earn that back, there's really uh, no real impact other than, them getting frustrated with their parent. And honestly, with older kids, grounding them really just gives them an opportunity to learn some skills about how to be sneaky and access it on their own anyway. So whenever you're using a punishment procedure, you definitely get this risk of the child retaliating, or having increases in negative behaviors, and the punishment procedure might have the effect over time of decreasing the behavior that you're targeting, but you should really pair it with reinforcement so that the outcomes are more positive.
Good, thank you. And also, just so that I have that, term response cost for any time I'm trying to refer to something like that or do research on it.
Oh yeah, you're welcome.
But
Thanks for the
thank you.
question. That was a great question.
Okay.
So next we're going to talk about motivation, and I promise you this is probably the most technical slide I will ever give you guys, but it's important to lay out what I mean by motivation, because in behavior analysis we talk about motivation in a very different way than people talk about it on a regular basis. So, when you're like, I don't feel motivated to go for a run, that's not what I'm talking about. In ABA, we're actually referring to motivating operations. So it's really a technical term here. So I'll go over it quickly, and then hopefully it'll make a little bit of sense to you guys. So, motivating operations are environmental variables that either alter how effective something is as a reinforcer, or alter the current frequency of behavior that has been reinforced by that stimulus. So, motivating operations, or motivation as we're going to talk about it today, is really about the environmental state that the person is in, and that environmental state's impact on their behavior and on the quality of the reinforcer. And there are two types of motivating operations. One is called an establishing operation. So this is the kind of motivation that increases the effectiveness of a reinforcer. So if you're hungry, food is going to be more reinforcing. If you're thirsty, water will be more reinforcing. If you've sat in a car for 5 hours on a car ride, getting out and playing outside is going to be more reinforcing. So when you think of an establishing operation, it's something that kind of sets the stage for the reinforcer to have a bigger impact. And then on the other side of it, there's an abolishing operation. The abolishing operation means that it's going to decrease how effective that reinforcement is. So if a child just finished playing outside and you're trying to get them to clean up their toys and then they can go play outside again, playing outside might not be that reinforcing anymore because the child's satiated. They've just finished playing outside. They're good. They don't need to work for that right now. So the takeaway from this slide, and I apologize for it being super technical, is when we talk about motivation, it kind of comes down to, is the child deprived? And when I say deprived, I mean in a state of deprivation for that specific item, or are they satiated? Did they just have access? Do they feel good? And they're not going to work for that item. So the reason that this is important to talk about before we jump into this too much is just, to kind of create that distinction between how people talk about motivation on a day-to-day basis and how I'm talking about it in a behavioral way. So here's an example for food motivation. So if a child is the first block on both of these examples is the motivational state. So the child's hungry in the blue set, or they want a special treat. The parent, the antecedent to the behavior that you're looking for, the parent says, well, first finish your morning routine, brushing your teeth, whatever that might be, and then we'll make some breakfast. So the kid's motivated because they're hungry. They're going to complete that morning routine, and then you can go make and eat breakfast. That's your consequence. So if you think about this in the breakdown we've talked about before with antecedents, behaviors, and consequences, there's an additional sort of environmental thing that you can keep an eye on that helps you decide which consequence is going to be more appropriate. So, like I said, the child's already hungry. They're asking for food. You're probably going to be able to get them to follow your direction, and then be able to reinforce them with what they want. And like I said, don't use meals as reinforcement. I'm just using this to demonstrate the relationship. So on the other side of this, on the abolishing operation side, the child's not hungry. They just finished eating. And the parent says the same thing. They say, hey, first finish your morning routine and then you can have a special treat. Well, the kid's going to walk away because they're not hungry. And that special treat's not as appealing. Even if it's like their most preferred candy, if a child's not hungry, they're less likely to work for that. So they don't want the special treat, so they don't get the special treat. And then they probably do get some attention in that situation in the form of redirection back to the morning routine. But the idea is to kind of understand the relationship between the environmental state that a child's in and how it impacts their behaviors, but also how it impacts how effective a reinforcer is going to be. So here's another example of some tangible motivation. Child hasn't watched TV at all today. And what you really want them to do, what's in this box right here, you want them to clean. You want them to clean up whatever it may be. So they haven't watched TV. The parent says, after cleaning up, you can watch some TV. Well, the kid's going to be more likely to clean because they haven't watched TV at all today. So they clean, they're able to watch a little bit of TV. That's kind of the relationship. But if your kid's currently watching TV and has been watching for a little while, and you try to pause that and say, hey, after cleaning, you can watch TV, you're probably going to get a little bit of backlash because they don't want you to shut the TV off in the first place. But they're really less likely to clean in that situation because they already have had access to that reinforcer. So the consequence of this is, some parents will turn the TV off and some parents will be like, well, oh, well, it didn't work this time, so they're going to just let the kid keep watching. But TV as a reinforcer at that time is less effective because they were in a state of satiation of TV. They didn't need more TV to be happy. They probably needed something else. So that's kind of the relationship that you have between motivation and reinforcers.
I would like to add one thing about that.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think one good point to add is if you do say that they can watch TV to have a set time limit. So if they know that they clean up, they can watch TV, telling them they can watch an hour, or if you know that their favorite show is on at 4 o'clock, but you're asking them to do something at 2 o'clock, asking them if they want to wait to 4 o'clock, and then or having them clean up right before their favorite TV show comes on, to really take those two in consideration. So that way, um, you don't want them to start asking at 4 o'clock if they used up their TV time during the 2 o'clock cleanup. So just kind of planning it accordingly. If you know that it's a TV show or a certain time it comes on.
Yeah, I think that's really a good thing to add is like timing of that reinforcement can be really important and timing of when you present the demands. Um, when I'm thinking about the kids who I work with in a clinic setting or in some of the school settings I've worked in, we're making these decisions throughout the entire day with a bunch of different um, types of activities, types of demands that we're asking, where we have different reinforcers going. But if you're really just focusing in on one thing, like, hey, cleaning up is really my focus right now. The kids have been leaving toys out after they go to bed. I'm cleaning for an hour, and you really want to get those kids cleaning up after themselves a little bit more, then I think that that's great feedback, Sarah. Like timing when you ask them to do it so that it coincides with their most reinforcing um, activity is going to be really effective. And I, honestly, your kids might push back and maybe they miss their favorite TV show one day and they have to experience the consequence of not having access to it for not following directions. So, it's definitely it's a relationship. So that timing is really appropriate. I would say if you offer the opportunity for them to watch the TV show later or use the time later, then I would still record that on a piece of paper and give it to them almost like a check or an IOU so that they still got something tangible in the moment when they completed the activity. So tying motivation and reinforcers together a little bit more. Remember to choose reinforcers that fit the motivational state your child is in. So the whole point of us kind of thinking about developing a list of different types of reinforcers is you can then use that list and if your child, hasn't played with their favorite fire trucks all day long, maybe you put the fire truck up on top of the fridge and they get access to it after they sat through lunch. I know that sitting down at the table is hard for a lot of kids, or they get access to it after they take their bath. So you can create motivational states by creating a state of deprivation um, by putting items out of reach, or shutting off the Wi-Fi. I know that that's something some parents do with kids who are really electronic motivated. So you choose reinforcers they haven't had access to recently. That's kind of the same idea as what I just talked about. And then choose items that are really highly preferred. So don't try to motivate um, your child who's not really interested in playing with Matchbox cars. Don't try to motivate them with a new Matchbox car. Try to motivate them with something that actually interests them. Or if they're not really into people making a big deal and being like, wow, you did such a good job. If they're not into that kind of praise, that's not the kind of motivation or the kind of reinforcement that you would want to use for that child. And then the other thing is kind of keeping an eye. If you're about to go ask your child to do something, keep an eye on what they're currently showing interest in. Kids will work for something that they're already using as long as they haven't already satiated on it. So if your kid just started playing with, building a fort or something like that, you can try to motivate them to clean up their previous activity before finishing helping them build the fort. So you can leverage that a little bit so you get your demand met, but also they get their desire met in that situation. Or if they're asking to watch TV, they're already interested in it. So maybe you were thinking of motivating them with going outside, but they want to watch TV right now and you're okay with that, that's okay to switch what your reinforcement is at that time. Definitely be flexible. Kids, their interests change second to second, so being flexible is important. Um, Make sure, again, make sure that you have any reinforcers that you have offered available. Don't run out of them. So if you have a child who really likes getting stickers, make sure that you have stickers available. If you um, if you're trying to have them work for something that's a little bit more long term, then create a system of check marks or earning you know uh, stars or something like that, so that then once they earn all of them, then it's immediately available or they immediately get to go to the store with you. If you ever have to say to your kid, yeah, you earned it, but I'm not going to be able to bring you until next week to get it, then you definitely are in a situation where you made that entire process not effective. It's not going to be reinforcing. What you're going to end up reinforcing in that situation is just waiting, which is good. I mean, that's a good skill to learn too, but it's probably not going to be reinforcing to the actual behavior you're trying to get them to engage in. And then keep in mind, people who have more than one kid, who are working with more than one kid, what works for one kid might not work for others. So um, I'm a huge fan of individualizing as much as possible, or even if you have like a family sticker chart running, that you can individualize the goals that each kid is working on, or you can individualize the type of reinforcement each child gets out of that sticker chart. So some resources for this week. I found some of the visuals from this week on Google, which if you guys have been with me the last few weeks, I think you know that I like to just Google things and no point recreating the wheel if there's something great out there already. Also, again, Teachers Pay Teachers has a lot of really great reinforcer assessments that are pre-made, along with other types of visual aids. I've found a lot on Pinterest in this category in the past. And then here's the link to that checklist assessment that I showed you guys earlier. I also have a PDF of that, so if anybody wants it, just shoot me an email and I can send that to you. It's really good to use in classrooms if you're really having a hard time motivating kids at school, and definitely would work for home too. And that was it for this week. So just want to remind everyone we are still operating remotely, but we are still taking intakes. So if you have any kids who you would like to refer for services, you can send over referrals, and that is something we're still able to process. And you can go to our website, autismai.com, to view the video of this training. And I'll have this training and last week's training up by the end of this week. We had a little bit of technical difficulty, so I will do that. And for referrals, you can send them to vermontreferral@autismai.com. And for anybody who's interested in reaching out to me directly, you can reach me at my email address, which is tiffanycochran@autismai.com. Does anybody have any questions about this week's topic?
I don't have a question, but I want to say thank you because this was exactly what I needed. I have 5 children, and the youngest one has the first, several weeks that we've been home, he was pretty good about doing his schoolwork, and I'd say ever since break, and having to get back into it, it's been a struggle, and trying to find ways to motivate him has been tough, and some of the old ways just weren't working. So this helped a lot because it made me think about some of his preferred activities that I haven't thought about yet. And I found myself even today like just wanting to punish, like take everything fun away for you until you get your schoolwork done, and that's just not an emotional state that any of us really need right now.
Yeah.
So this hit right at the right time for me. I've got a whole bunch of notes. And I was thinking too, I know one of the things that Sarah had shared last week with those binders.
Yeah.
So I was just thinking, that thing you showed, the what I'm working for with the stars. writing something like that and slipping it in one of those binders, and then he can fill it in with a dry erase marker, and we can use it for multiple things. So I'm making that as I sit here.
I have that file if you want me to just email it to you. Then you can just print it.
Well, my printer is sort of hit or miss.
Okay.
I've put multiple different ink cartridges in it over the last several weeks, and it works when it wants to. So I've just decided to give up, and I'm writing everything out by hand.
Oh, that's perfect.
Fine.
Well, thank you so much for that. I'm glad that it was a well-timed topic. It was something that I attended a conference over the weekend, a virtual conference, which was a really interesting experience. And this was a topic that came up during the conference, and I know we had been talking about a little bit in the previous weeks. So I went down a little bit of a behavior analyst dork kind of hole, and I was like, I want to talk about this. I find it interesting. Um, but I'm glad that there's some good takeaway value for you this week.
Well, definitely the whole thing about like the satiation of the activity. Like one of the things where I've been realizing where I made my mistakes were offering things that we've been doing tons of. So no wonder, and then getting frustrated with him when he's not like excited to do it. So
Exactly.
Definitely like helpful and made me think a little bit today. And I have some ideas for tomorrow. So
Exactly. Like week 1, he might have been really interested in helping you, bake some brownies or something like that. But what are we on, like day 49 or something? So
yeah.
day 49, he might not be as interested in that as he was, a couple weeks ago or something like that.
Exactly. Yep. So I'm going to have to rack my brain a little bit and think of things that we haven't done in a while.
Well, definitely, if you want, email me directly because I have different types of reinforcer assessments for different age groups too. So the one that I shared is pretty appropriate for a really young kid, but there are some that are more appropriate and for older kids that might be helpful too.
Okay.
And Tiffany, I just want to say thank you for recording and posting these, because I have families who do want to see them, but 4:00 is a hard time for some of them. And so I had in my notes to get the email, the YouTube address and
Yes.
the AAI address where they can find them. So
yes,
you.
And all of the videos are posted on this website right here.
Okay.
So if they don't find us on YouTube, they can access them through that website.
Okay. I'll give them that one anyway. So
yeah, and definitely for families who have been looking for the video from last week, it will be up by the end of this week. Like I said, we had a little bit of technical difficulties. So there's a little delay in getting that one up, but I think everything's kind of sorted out at this point. I think my computer is getting sick of me using it so much.
Hey, aren't you guys redoing your website too?
Yeah, we are redoing our website and updating it with some more information so that anyone who's visited us previously, because the Vermont aspect was so new and we didn't have a lot of information on there, so we're really ramping that up a little bit, putting little profiles of our staff on, talking a little bit more about the different types of services that we offer. So definitely check it out anyway. And if you guys have any feedback, I'd love to hear it because we're excited about it.
Tiffany, I had one more thing on the resources that you put up. I use Pinterest a lot, but I'm kind of like trying to figure out like what I would search on a topic like this, because usually I'm doing cooking things.
That's a great question. So, kind of rule of thumb if you're looking for stuff like this is you can, like behavior charts, stuff like that, you can probably just type in behavior chart or reinforcer assessment. I usually throw ABA after it because if you're looking for something that's a little more behavior analytic, you'll get those. There's a huge applied behavior analysis community on Pinterest. And I'm sure any of the teachers who are on here today probably have seen there's a huge teacher population out there too. And these, so yeah, definitely I would say if you're looking for stuff on Pinterest, type in like behavior charts or reinforcer assessment, reinforcer survey, and then throw ABA after it if the stuff that you're searching doesn't really look like what you're looking for. And again, reach out to me if you have any questions, because I'm happy to help people kind of navigate that too. Or I might already have materials on my end.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else?
I have one more comment that I was thinking about.
Yeah, go for it.
My comment is, when we do decide what the reinforcer is, say it's TV, to make sure that all adults are on board. And it could be simple as the kid goes upstairs and the parent says, yeah, you can watch the TV. Or a special toy that's on top of the fridge and the kid asks for it, and the other parent goes and gives it to them. So to make sure that all parents and grandparents or any adults involved or in the area know what's going on.
Yes, thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you for that comment, because it's not even something that I had thought of as I was like developing the training with you the other day. But that's such a good point. If you if you are helping your kid work towards gaining some reinforcement and another parent is like doesn't know that that's going on, and then sees the kid watching TV after maybe they told them not to watch the TV earlier, that's going to set the kid up for failure. It's going to set the parents up for, dispute or failure. So it's definitely important to communicate about those things, or, alternately to communicate when a limit has been set and something is not going to be available. You don't want to create that situation of a kid realizing like, well, if I ask my dad, I'm going to be able to do this. But if I ask mom, she might say no, or vice versa. I guess I don't want to make mom the bad guy all the time. So, so definitely, communication is key in anything that you do to work on changing a child's behavior. Thank you for that.
Motivators reminded me of, have you ever heard of the preferred 5 love languages that people, I can only think of 4 right now, like praise is one, service is one, a gift is one, or your time. And we all have preferred ones that, help us, but in thinking of your child, to think of like, what are their preferred ways of, motivating them.
Exactly. And I think, there are so many different ways that you can approach figuring out those reinforcers and what the motivation is, and, generally what your child's going to respond to more. And I think that that's
like
a really nice way to approach that.
Yeah, some children like praise and some children don't.
Exactly.
Yeah, and another good point is to make sure that when we're reinforcing and praising them, we're praising them exactly what we like, instead of just saying good job, saying thank you for doing the exact action that you're reinforcing.
Yeah, that's a really great point too, is, when you're delivering reinforcement that's verbal, it should be extremely clear. It should state exactly what you are reinforcing. Try to avoid vague sort of blanket statements, and definitely let them know that you recognize that what they're doing is what you're looking for, and what those actions are. So I think if there's nothing else, then I'm gonna close out and we can say goodbye. I
just need to know if there's any Head Start staff with their cameras off so I can take attendance.
Okay, what I'll do is I'll stop the screen share and stop recording, and then we can come right on to the video, if that works for you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thanks guys. I'm gonna stop recording now, and I'll see you face to face in a second here.